All right, I'll just get started then. So welcome everyone to our Sick Day Rules event with our lovely nurse Pauline. For those of you who haven't met me or seen me virtually before, my name's Lottie. I'm the Communications Officer at the Pituitary Foundation. And yeah, today we're joined by our nurse Pauline, who I'm sure many of you have spoken to before on the phone, because she is the person that looks after, or one of the people that looks after our endocrine nurse helpline. So for those of you who aren't aware, we are the Pituitary Foundation. We are a patient advocacy charity, and we support people with pituitary conditions. So we've got a range of support services, including support groups, 2 different helplines, a telephone buddy service. We're completely funded by donations and fundraising, and we also do lots of advocacy work trying to raise awareness of pituitary conditions amongst medical professionals, and working to sort of improve care within endocrine clinics as well. So on this event, we're going to be going through the sick day rules and adrenal crisis as well. And then there's going to be an opportunity for a Q&A at the end. And if you do have any questions, please pop them in the chat box and we'll get to them at the end of the talk. So I'm just going to mention a few quick housekeeping things, just so that we can all get the best out of this event. So if you're welcome, if you'd like to have your camera on, that's really great. We love to see all your smiling faces. So if you feel comfortable and you're able, please do turn your cameras on. We do ask that you stay on mute throughout the call. That just helps anyone that it creates good sound quality basically for everyone. And you can do that using the button at the bottom left of your screen. Sorry, I'm really bad with my left and right, so that's a little tricky for me to say, but you can just click mute there, and I might come and mute you if you do have your sound on, your microphone on, so don't be alarmed if I do that, just in case we are getting any interference. There is the option to put on closed captions at the bottom of the screen, and these are AI generated, so they're not necessarily fully accurate, but you can just do that by clicking the more button at the bottom of the screen, and you can enable captions there. It's fine if you need to leave the session early, that is absolutely fine. You can just exit, you don't need to say goodbye or anything. And we are recording this session. It will be available on YouTube after the event. So if you want to watch back or anything, or send the recording to anyone else, then please feel free to do that. If you've got any questions, please use the chat function. And of course, I'm sure you all will be, but people may be sharing sort of personal experiences. So we do ask that you are respectful of other people sharing their personal experiences. So now that we've got through all of that, Pauline, would you like to start?
Right, okay, take it away. Hello everyone. Hopefully I've spoken to at least 1 or 2 of you previously, and most likely this evening we're going to go over things that your endocrine team have already told you at some point in time, hopefully, but if not, here we are. So as Lottie said, my name is Pauline Whittingham. I'm the endocrine nurse for the Pituitary Foundation, well, one of. We also have Darshna. I'm on the helpline for 3 mornings a week. Darshna does most of Tuesday. My background is very firmly lodged within endocrinology nursing. I was specialist nurse at a major teaching hospital for 20 years, and prior to that did a long time on the medical investigations unit. So I've got a good background in the pituitary and all its faults and variations that it can cause. So we're off today on a run through the sick day rules relating to cortisol, and so obviously relating to adrenal insufficiency. My plan would be to go through the slides, talk through the slides, and leave a fair bit of time towards the end for the questions that arise, because I think the information is there, it's available should you wish to find it. But I think sometimes it's the questions and the discussion that can have a lot of value as well. So with that said, on we go to our first slide.
Right.
So what is a sick day? So a sick day basically is a period where your body is unable to respond as it should to whatever event is going on. That response is altered because of your lack of ability to produce cortisol. So we think of them as being unwell, where your body temperature goes above 38 degrees. You may feel chilled, shivery, flu-like. If you don't have a thermometer at home, oftentimes putting the flat of your hand just there on your chest, just below the pulse, and getting a sense of what that temperature is like. If that feels really hot, the likelihood is you've got a raised temperature. Sick days can also be due to an intense psychological stress. So if there's a bereavement or a sudden traumatic incident that you witness, that can lead to you needing to take extra cortisol that day. Diarrhea, if it's repeated and persistent, with or without vomiting, so just diarrhea on its own, is classed as a sick day, because that limits your ability to absorb your cortisol doses fully. Day surgery, obviously ordinary, day surgery where you're having an anaesthetic and you're having some actual surgical work done, but also dental work and some gastrointestinal investigations. Planned surgery for the bigger things, such as hip replacements, etc. And there is actually a set of guidelines published by the Association of Anaesthetists that outline how they should be looking after people who are coming under their care for anaesthetic work. That was worked upon with the anaesthetist and with the Society for Endocrinology. And then obviously any accident or trauma. So if you're involved in an accident, if you fall, if you're in a car accident, if you witness that, or indeed if you are injured as a result of that. So you can see from that sick days encompass a whole range of things. And it can be difficult to pick out, is this a sick day? Is it not? So why would you, on those occasions, increase your cortisol intake? Well, the human body automatically increases cortisol to respond to stress of illness, trauma, injury, psychological stress. When you have lost the ability to produce cortisol because the pituitary gland no longer sends signals into the adrenal gland, you are no longer able to do that. You take daily replacements to replace that function. So therefore you also have to replace the sick day function by taking more cortisol. Those increases of cortisol at the right time help our bodies to fight infection, prepare us for fight or flight, maintain blood pressure, and maintain circulating blood sugar. So in the presence of an infective stress, it's going to help us fight that infection. It's going to help the body organs cope with dealing with what it needs to do to fight that infection. If there's a mad axeman running after you, it's going to help us run away. Likewise, if you're in an accident, it's going to help the cortisol being increased will help with maintaining body stasis. During those times, if you increase your cortisol doses, it can actually help to avert a potential adrenal crisis. And that's the thing that a lot of people get worried about, adrenal crisis. So when would you increase it? As soon as you recognize the illness. So if you have a temperature, you have diarrhea, you're vomiting, you increase your cortisol as soon as you recognize that illness. You would increase it in advance of any minor surgical work, so dental work or day surgery. Again, any significant accident, injury, trauma or bereavement, you would increase it then. Again, also if you witness trauma or bereavements, injury, you may need it then too. There are some occasions whereby if you are undertaking significant physical exercise, such as a hard football match or a hard hockey match, training for a marathon, running a marathon. We've even had one chap this year who did some Ironman training to raise funds for us, which is quite entertaining. But you could probably need some hydrocortisone, extra hydrocortisone before undertaking that exercise to actually help your body get through that exercise. That level of exercise is an extra strain on the systems. But general day-to-day stresses like running late for work and missing the bus or tripping over the cat, or unless of course you get injured, the general stuff that comes along day to day is not generally indicated to increase cortisol for those. How you increase it? General advice is at the first signs of feeling unwell, you double all your normal doses for a period of 48 hours and then reassess. If that is not resolving or is getting at any time worse, then you must seek medical advice, be that through your GP, through A&E, dialing NHS 111, or going to a walk-in centre. You must get medical advice. If the illness is particularly severe, so you've got a real chest infection and temperature's up at 38.5 and you're on antibiotics, etc., there are some endocrine centres that will actually allow 3 times the daily doses for very short periods, e.g. for like 24 to 48 hours. The timing of your doses can shift. So normally you'd probably take your hydrocortisone in a set pattern, maybe 2 or 3 times a day. If you're going up to 2 or 3 times the normal amount, you can actually split that so that you take a dose every 6 hours, which specifically for infective illnesses will give the body more cortisol cover over the whole 24-hour period and can actually help promote feelings of stability more. Usually if it's a short-lived illness, 24 to 48 hours will be fine for you to get through that, combat the worst of it, start the recovery. But if it's a persistent illness, like we saw through COVID, if there's antibiotic therapy prescribed, you would need to go beyond that 48 hours. So that would be if a temperature was persisting, so until the temperature was resolved. Antibiotics, be they 3-day, 5-day, 7-day course, you stay on your increased dose for the whole of that time. Some of the larger surgeries, you may find that you are supported with IV hydrocortisone until you're able to eat and drink. And then once you can eat and drink, you will be given extra oral cortisol over and above your normal amount until you are at a point where they judge you are returning to stability from the surgical point of view. And that comes back to that guidance that has been issued by the Association for Anaesthetists. We have got a link for that on our website. And I think I've got the links. Obviously, that's a link for it there, but we can put that up for you later on if needs be. So you can actually have sight on that. So adrenal crisis is the biggie that most people worry about because it's not pleasant. It really isn't pleasant. I've never had one. I know a lot of people that have, and they're not good. How do you recognize one? What is one? So they come with multiple signs and symptoms, and many people will come to recognize their own pattern or their own telltale signs. What we hear commonly reported would be an overwhelming tiredness over and above what you normally have. You're feeling shivery, cold, clammy, maybe feeling like you've got the flu, but you haven't. People may tell you that you look pale and clammy. A lot of people will say they get a distinct ache in their back, around the bottom of the ribs, around the waist, and in the legs. The legs feel like they're heavy and draggy. There may be some nausea and possible also some vomiting and diarrhea, which kind of then accelerates the whole thing on. Headache is common, feeling dizzy, especially on standing, fidgety, just jittery, feeling faint. Blood pressure may drop. If you're used to monitoring your blood pressure at home, you may see that your blood pressure drops down. And the most often trigger for one of these things is an episode of vomiting and or diarrhea. So you can see why, if you had vomiting and diarrhea as part of your symptoms of a crisis, it's really going to push you into one. What do you do to respond? I would hope all of you, if you're on hydrocortisone, will have an emergency hydrocortisone injection at home. This can be given in those circumstances where you feel a crisis is impending. You give that injection into a muscle. You may not be in a fit state to give it. So it's useful to have somebody at home or the neighbour that can do it for you. Failing that, as soon as you feel you are heading into crisis, you contact either NHS 111 or 999, and you say, I'm a patient with adrenal insufficiency. I am having an adrenal crisis. I am unable to reach my injection. That actually increases your priority on their call sheet and puts you at sort of top of the list, up with the heart attacks and major incidents, for them to get an ambulance out to you. During the time you're waiting for them to come, use double doses of the whole oral hydrocortisone if you're able to take it. Obviously, if you're vomiting, that's not going to help, because it will just come straight back up. But as far as you can, protect yourself with more oral hydrocortisone. As we say there, if you're not already doing so, get that increased in straight away, 2 to 3 times your normal doses. And that's the advice. That advice about contacting NHS 111, about ringing and saying we have adrenal insufficiency but in adrenal crisis, that come to us from the ambulance service. We had a joint presentation with them as part of our awareness month last year, and that is the advice that they now issue to all of the trusts throughout this country. They used to run a red flag system. They no longer operate that. Instead, they have implemented across all trusts nationwide an alert where a patient rings in with those details, that flags the alert up. So that was it very briefly. These are our link resources. Mostly it can be found through our website. All of the links are there to our sick day rules table. We've a table for recognising adrenal crisis. We've the link to the Association for Anaesthetists guidelines. We've also a downloadable version of the NHS steroid card. We would strongly advise that all of you carry at a minimum the NHS steroid card. That steroid card now allows medical staff to access into Society for Endocrinology guidance on how to treat a person who is in adrenal crisis presenting in A&E. So that can be really valuable and useful for you to take into hospital if you're going that way. Medical alert jewellery, absolutely use it, buy it. There's so much out there now. A quick Google search will show multiple organisations that sell it. We've got some on our website. It's very basic silicone bands, but you can get anything you want beyond that: watches, bracelets, all sorts of things. Alerts on your phone, in your emergency contact, on your mobile phone. Get it in there as well. You can download the steroid card onto your phone. There is a lot of ways of alerting people to the fact that you are adrenal insufficient, and if you are in a certain set of situations, you will need extra help. I think we'll just go straight into questions, Lottie.
Yeah, that sounds great. So I had a couple of questions before. So one of the questions was about sick day rules and bad period cramps, and would you recommend increasing cortisol for
that? Right, now this is the thing. There are so many variations in people and how they experience period cramps and the need for cortisol. So you can have period cramps, which are a bit of backache and make you feel ickety horrible, but you get on with life. You can get period cramps where you're laid on the floor vomiting and maybe fainting. So it really is a balance. It's about knowing what's normal for you. And if you're the poor unfortunate that is laid on the floor vomiting and fainting, then absolutely you're going to need to cover yourself with more hydrocortisone on those days, because the vomiting itself and the actual amount of pain that induces at that point. Again, that would be a day where you would double all doses, probably, maybe the day after as well. For something on a scale that was kind of midway, you may need just one extra dose that day to help you get through the day. And some may need nothing at all. It's really about assessing yourself on those days and knowing the signs of the adrenal crisis. And if they start coming in, then have a bit extra cortisol to combat them.
Thank you. And the other question was about the sick day rules and vaccinations. So if you were having vaccinations, whether that's COVID, a flu jab, or travel vaccinations, would you need to increase your cortisol?
You shouldn't do, because most of the vaccinations are not live. They are what they call attenuated. That said, I've spoken to quite a few people who didn't respond well to some of the COVID vaccines at all, and actually did need to support themselves with some more hydrocortisone. I would say I would have conversations with the person giving the vaccine first, for one, to see what sort of vaccine is it that's going in. Is it a live vaccine? If it's a live vaccine, then I would say, yes, you will most likely need to use some extra hydrocortisone, because obviously the live vaccine is a form of the illness you're trying to protect against. That, again, the green book, there's a document through the NHS called Green Book on Vaccinations. And I think it details in there that patients taking steroids shouldn't be given live vaccines. Now, some vaccine centres will look at somebody who's taken cortisol replacement and go, you're on steroids, you can't have a live vaccine. That's not necessarily the case. It's that more applies more to people who are using the high dose steroids and are immunosuppressed because of it. It's not usually relating to the replacement. But to answer, should you be double dosing for all vaccines? Probably not. I would have conversations with the vaccine giver about what is it live or not? What are the expected side effects? And if they say, we expect you to get a temperature for 2 days, then yes, you will increase your hydrocortisone. If they say, oh, you shouldn't feel anything but a sore arm, then you probably don't need to. Obviously, paracetamol is a great little thing if people can tolerate it. That's usually the saving, certainly was around the COVID vaccines. 2 paracetamol before you have it, keep it up every 6 hours thereafter for a day or 2. And that was, for some, a bigger help than extra cortisol.
Thank you. So the first question that we've got from the chat is, do you have an update on the supply issues with hydrocortisone sodium phosphate? We
don't, unfortunately. And that has been a bugbear for so long now for so many people. And we have no word of when to expect. And it's frustrating for all of us. But it must be incredibly scary for people who actually need it. But as soon as we hear, we'll have it out on the news. Lottie's your girl for that.
Yeah, don't worry. I will. We'll let everyone know as soon as we hear anything about that. But yeah, so I think this from Michelle is more of a point about the COVID vaccine. So Alison has asked, when we are prescribed cortisol, how much extra should be allowed for each month? So above minimum to compensate for updosing. So I think that's a question about how much GPs should subscribe.
Okay. Yeah. All right. This is a difficult one because GPs are under a whole set of guidelines, all of their own, from the commissioning group that they form part of. But good practice would say that you should have at home a minimum of obviously the month's supply of what you're using and at least 2 weeks as a buffer, so that if something happens and you didn't get your prescription on time, you've got a little bit to go into because you don't want to run out ever. Also, if you do become ill in that time, you've got that extra 2 weeks there that you can double up with. Within that doubling up time, you'd be making contact with your GP to get another supply of double up time. Some GPs will issue 56-day prescriptions, and actually it's seen as good practice to do that for people who are on well-established and stable on long-term medications. Some may even go longer than 56 days. So have a conversation with your GP, see where they are able to work to, and kind of try and get an agreement with your GP that, look, this is my situation now, this is what I need. What have you got to work around to make that happen for me?
Thank you, Pauline. Okay, so Rebecca has said, I have been on antibiotics long-term due to an embedded UTI. No one advised me, so I double dosed, but I became Cushingoid. Now I just take double the first few days of infection. Is this correct?
Yes, that's the one caveat to doubling up for antibiotics. There are some people in the world who sadly do get those sort of embedded infections and need continued background antibiotic therapy. But obviously they get peaks of infection and then they get an upscale of their antibiotic therapy. For the background antibiotic therapy, it's not recommended to double dose because sadly you come to the position where you were in. But absolutely right to increase when the infection peaks, because one, you've got an infection, and two, no doubt you will be increasing your antibiotic or taking a different antibiotic as well at that point. So yeah, those couple of days where you get that infection, yes, but otherwise stay to your normal level.
And I think it's also worth noting there that if like your GP or someone hasn't told you this information, that our endocrine nurse helpline is there to answer those sorts of questions. So yeah, please do give them a call because that is what we are here for. So our next question is from Miriam. Hi, I take Plenadrin. How do the sick day rules apply, as I take my medication once a day?
Generally, Plenadrin, obviously we know the long release. Generally, you would be given some hydrocortisone to supplement for sick days. That's what's happened with other people I've known on Plenadrin. You have your Plenadrin as your background, and then if sick days come in, you take hydrocortisone at sort of a standard rate. Alternative to that, I've known one or two who have taken their Plenadrin twice a day. So where you normally take it once, you take it twice to try and give that extra cover. But I think because of the way that acts and its mechanism of action, that may not be entirely the most accurate way of getting cover. I would have a good chat with your endocrinology team about that, because you should get sick day cover. The Plenadrin will do just the standard job. It won't do sick day job as well. So I would have a little conversation with your team about how to react to sick days.
Thank you. So question from Helen M. Do you have any advice for sick day rules when having radiotherapy?
Oh, radiotherapy. It's a difficult one, this one, because if it's pituitary radiotherapy, I presume, or cranial radiotherapy anyway, there's often the chance that there'll be some swelling within the skull, and on occasions the radiotherapy team will actually prescribe some dexamethasone to reduce that swelling down, so that will also have a steroid effect in. Generally, pituitary radiotherapy, unless you're becoming sick and vomiting with the radiotherapy, you don't really need to increase the hydrocortisone throughout. The many people I knew stayed on their standard dose unless they became nauseous. The radiotherapy will make you feel tired. That's the nature of radiation, unfortunately. And the ideal thing to do with that is to rest as much as you can.
Okay, thank you for that one. So Rebecca has said, since I've had AI, I have loose stools most days. I have had tests and there is no reason for this with my bowel. I am not sure if it is a sign of low cortisol. I haven't recovered in 19 months since crisis. I am still very weak, have a lot of body pain, loose stools, very fatigued. Could the loose stools be causing me to not absorb all my steroids?
They could. Depends how many there are. If it's once a day, maybe not. If it's 3 or 4, possibly. Again, I would say a chat with endocrinology there to see whether that dose that you're on is actually the right dose for you, whether you need an uplift in dose, maybe. And that would actually help settle down all of those symptoms that you've had for the last 19 months, which is a horrible amount of time to be sat like that. It's horrible.
I'm sorry that you've been experiencing that, Rebecca. So our next question is from Dion. I read there is a 3-hour window to take your emergency hydrocortisone injection before your situation becomes fatal. Is this correct?
We have that information, I think, as our clock. Now, I don't think there's any major hard and fast, everyone must have their injection within a set time. The advice is to have it as soon as you can. And if you feel you are heading into a crisis, then you get to a hospital, basically, whether you've had your injection or not. Now, be that, obviously you're not going to be able to take yourself. So be it an ambulance, be it somebody that lives with you or somebody you live with that takes you in the car, be it a taxi, whatever form you've got to get into A&E. It's you just get there, basically. The critical time to have it would be within that 3-hour window. Whether it would be fatal after 3 hours depends on so many other things. You know, the underlying condition of the person overall, the reason for the crisis. There's so many, the effects of the crisis on blood chemistry and on body systems. So it's hard to put a definitive cut-off point for fatality, but we do know that adrenal crises are a life-threatening condition and they need to be treated urgently.
Thank you, Pauline. So our next question is from Andrea. What is the best wording to put on a medic alert bracelet? They have both AVP deficiency and adrenal insufficiency.
Oh dear. I would put cortisol and desmopressin dependent for both of those. That basically tells people who pick that bracelet up what is missing and what is needed. AVPD may not get it across. Desmopressin deficient will. And adrenal insufficiency and AVPD or diabetes insipidus would fill the bracelet and no room for anything else. So I think cortisol deficient, desmopressin deficient, tell that person, if it's an ambulance man, for instance, that's what he needs to think about. Okay.
Perfect, thank you. And that is also what our silicone wristbands that we sell in our shop they also have that on them. So it's obviously we've got two separate ones for adrenal insufficiency and AVPD as well. And for those who don't know, AVPD is what used to be called diabetes insipidus, but it's had a name change. Okay, next question from Pamela. Can/should one updose if you have PTSD and know you'll be facing triggers, or have faced the triggers and aren't doing well?
Again, that is so individual, really so individual. So it's, you know, the person with PTSD knows their PTSD and knows their triggers and knows their recovery. It may be that that PTSD is so bad that the trauma that they suffer in an episode is enough to drop their cortisol down. So yes, there may be a case there that you need to take an extra dose. But there can be no hard and fast on that. You would have to develop that skill of self-assessment of, you know, is this dizziness, nausea, headache all to do with my cortisol? Cortisol will always make you feel better when you take more. It's a funny little thing like that. It does that. Makes you feel great when you take a bit extra. But obviously, if you keep taking a bit extra, it has its damaging effects. So it's about learning to understand what your body is telling you when these symptoms come along and reacting in the right way to it. But again, I can't give a definitive answer about PTSD. It's so individual. There may well be occasions when they will need to take extra.
Thank you. So our next question comes from Stacey, and this is a paediatric question, Pauline, so hopefully you'll still be able to answer. So Stacey's daughter is 5 and she's only recently diagnosed. They're very new on their journey. Should we be giving extra doses when she becomes emotionally distraught? So I assume
same thing. It depends on the emotion distress, really. The difficulty with extra cortisol is it can also affect mood in an adverse way. So if you've got the right balance of cortisol and things are going okay, then and somebody just has a bit of a bad mood, then no. But if it's a real heart wrench fall apart, there may be a need for a bit extra, but I would be guided very clearly by the paediatric team. It would be really difficult with a 5-year-old to get a full assessment on whether she'd need extra or not in that situation.
Okay, thank you, Pauline. So our next question is from Andrea. If it becomes necessary to attend A&E in an adrenal crisis, what would be the best course of action if faced with a long queue to register and then a long wait for triage?
There shouldn't be. According to the ambulance lady that we had on last year, there shouldn't be. When you present at the desk, that is the thing that triggers how quickly you go through the various stages. Now, we all know what A&E is like. So I would say, as you go into A&E, it doesn't matter whether you're wheeled in, walked in, carried in, poured in, whatever. As you get into A&E, whoever books you in at the desk makes it very plain and very clear that it's a life-threatening situation and it's an adrenal crisis and it needs attention now. They're receptionists. They're going to tell you to sit down and da-di-da-di-da. Give it 5 minutes. Go back. You know, just keep raising the alert that this isn't good. If you are in full adrenal crisis and you've not had your injection, the likelihood is you won't be able to take a seat. You'll need a trolley or you'll be on the floor. And that should raise a few eyebrows and get some attention. It would normally. And it may well be that your actual clinical condition when you go in is the thing that raises the alert to get you in, to get triaged quickly and start getting attention. That is the thing that governs positions in an A&E system, is how that person looks in front of them, rather than how they arrived, what order they arrived in, etc., etc.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully that answers your question. So Karen has asked, is it safe to take herbal medicines when on hydrocortisone? I'm looking at taking echinacea to help keep colds at bay, as when I get colds, they knock me for six.
Oh, I'd be very careful with herbals. They interact an awful lot. A lot of the drugs that we use, be they replacements or actual medications, are metabolized by our livers with a system of enzymes. And a lot of herbal medications affect those enzyme systems in the liver. So I would be extremely careful with herbal treatments, and I would have a long chat with your pharmacist about that, because they will be able to get all of the information on it.
Thank you. So next question is from Pamela. So almost every time I bend over and garden out in the sun, I feel my body starting to slip. If I don't address it and give up gardening right away, it has escalated to a crisis before. Should I minorly increase my dose before going out, but not the usual double dose?
That's an odd one. Just gardening. That's very, very light level exercise to be inducing a cortisol drop. And I'd wonder if there was something more about the position rather than it being overall cortisol that brings that symptom on. But obviously cortisol will help recovery. I'm reluctant to say, oh, yes, go ahead and increase your dose, because, you know, if you're out gardening 2 or 3 times a week in the summer, that's going to lead to quite a lot of extra cortisol that you might not necessarily need. So I'd maybe have a little think, is there something else? Is there maybe a bit of arthritis in the neck or something like that is causing a pinch of a nerve or a pinch of a blood vessel that causes you to be dizzy and feel like you're on the way out? And then obviously when you sit back and you take a bit extra cortisol, it helps to sort of restabilize and resolve things. Or is it in fact the overall cortisol dose isn't sufficient and needs to be assessed and looked at so that you can get on a new pattern of the way that you take things?
Thank you.
Okay.
So our next question is from Charlotte. How can you order a new hydrocortisone injection, as our doctors won't replace our expired one and we are on a waiting list for an appointment for the endocrinologist?
Oh, usually it's an agreement through the endocrinologist and the GP. Usually the endocrinologist will issue the first and provide the training for it, and subsequent prescriptions will be picked up by the GP. If the GP won't do that, I'd be asking why. I'd be asking the GP why. And if they're not prepared to engage, I'd be going to the practice manager maybe and asking practice manager why, when I've had this for however many years. Now, it may be that you've had that one in the cupboard for a couple of years and it fell off the end of your repeat prescription system within the GP. So therefore, they don't think that you've ever had it. And what they may want is another letter from your endocrinologist. Sometimes that will happen. I would at least try emailing into your endocrinology, and even if you don't see them yet, ask them to write to GP to say, can we please provide ongoing repeat prescriptions of, and detail what they need you to have. Okay.
Okay, thank you for that. I think we do have a letter that is going up on our website in the next few days.
Okay, good. Template one.
Yeah, template.
Good.
So yeah, that might be one that would be useful too. So our next question is, I take pred. I I assume they mean prednisolone.
Prednisolone, yeah.
Originally due to PMR, but now
Okay.
adrenals not working properly. I constantly feel below par and have to rest every afternoon. Is it possible this will get better? I feel I've lost the last 4 years, mostly due to effects of pred on my adrenals.
It's possible. It can get better. What's happened there is an inflammatory autoimmune condition, Polymyalgiarheumatica, treated with high-dose steroids over a significant period of time. And that high-dose steroid has suppressed the adrenals. So the adrenals basically have gone on holiday because the job was being done for them with these steroids that were being taken. So it sounds, hopefully the PMR is under control and is sorted, but the adrenals are still on holiday and on strike and decided that they're not going to play the game. So what we have to do now is try and convince them that actually the job's still there to do and you can still do it. So that usually is achieved by reducing the cortisol dose or the prednisolone dose very, 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 very slowly, again, over a significant period of time. And it can take many, many, many months, sometimes in towards the 18 months, 2 years stage. And it can be really, really difficult with some of the feelings that the questionnaire is reporting. It may be that the effects of the prednisolone have been so harsh on the adrenals that they're not going to recover. But that only time will tell, really. And there's no easy way around it. There really isn't any easy way around it. It's a hard slog, that one. Sad to say, but.
Thanks, Pauline. So next question. This is a very good question from Louise. So I get very shaky as I go into crisis and find using the pre-mixed hydrocortisone vials hard enough. I dread having to mix the hydrocortisone powder and liquid if I'm on my own. Can it be made up in advance if I think I might need it? How long would it keep in the fridge?
Oh, no, I would say not long. I honestly don't know is the answer to that one as to what the reconstitution time on that would be, but I would suspect it wouldn't be long. I would suspect certainly no more than a few hours. Definitely not more than a day because of how it's formulated. I would say if you're in a situation where you're going into crisis and you're shaky, and you've got that 2-part mix and you cannot do the mix, get some oral tablets in. Get your tablets in. Just, get 2 or 3 times your normal dose and get them in. They'll take a bit longer to get into your system. But get them in, and that may then get you in a position where you're able to give yourself the injection. The
Pauline,
2-part mix one.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
Right.
Well, I know a couple of people who use the Solucortef in their I've forgotten what they're called now. Pumps, cortisol pumps. I know not many people have got cortisol pumps, and it's a relatively new thing, but they're proving very useful for people who struggle to maintain cortisol levels and have a lot of crises. So I know a couple of people with those now, and they've had to self-fund, but they use Solucortef, and they generally say that a Solucortef mix can go for them for about 3 days.
Interesting. Hopefully they've done some of the work on that, but that's good. As you say, not many people will be able to access the pump. It would be ideal if everybody could, but again, it comes down to funding and it comes down to service provision. They probably haven't got in the NHS enough people to oversee the provision of pumps to the number of people who are adrenal insufficient. In terms of how long it would be patent if left in the fridge reconstituted, I don't think there's been any actual research work done on that in terms of its efficacy and how much of it would be effective. But it's interesting that the pumps get 1 ampule to go over 3 days.
I think there's only a couple of specific consultants who are actually doing it, because, you know, as you say, a lot of them don't know much about it, but it's very expensive. So yeah, people have to self-fund. I know one of my friends had to pay about £3,000 to get set up.
Yeah, and the pumps don't last. They do need replacing every few years as well, so it can be a dear do, but
yeah,
interesting. Okay, Lottie,
for your input there. So another question from Eliza is, do we not call 999 anymore? I wondered if that would be a quicker response in an emergency than 111.
yes, you could absolutely call 999. 111 is there if you are 999 obviously is the help, I'm in an emergency situation, come and get me, pick me up and take me in. 111 is the sort of precursor to that. So if you're not feeling well and you're not sure if you're in crisis or not, but you're feeling really ropey and you don't know where you are, 111, if you ring them, tell them the same information, then they can get a paramedic out to assess you at home, or they can get an ambulance straight to your door. So it really depends on your situation at the time as to which route you go down, but either route would get you the help you need quickly.
Okay, Tara has asked, I've read somewhere that it's safe to use out-of-date hydrocortisone injection if needed while waiting for stock. Is this okay to do?
Yep, we learnt that through the COVID time, didn't we? That even if the one that you had was a couple of months, 2-3 months out of date, you can still go ahead and use it. It will have lost a little bit of efficacy, but it would still be a bolus injection. It would still be a bulk of hydrocortisone. May not be the full 100 milligram dose that you were getting. You might get an 80 milligram dose, but it would be better than nothing.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, we don't have too long left, so I'm just going to pick some of the questions. So a question from Helen: are there long-term / short-term issues with doubling your dose too often?
Short term, no. And if in doubt, double it. You know, if it's a Saturday and you're thinking, oh, I'm not right, oh, double it. Think about it on Sunday or Monday. Long term, yes. If you double your doses for months on end, we go back to the lady earlier on who had that bladder infection that was on long-term antibiotics that doubled their dose the whole time. You get a round face, your blood pressure goes up, you have problems controlling blood sugar, bones become thin, skin becomes thin, easy bruising. So again, it's about balance. What we don't want is to overdo it. We want to put the right amount in at the right time. So if you're in a situation and you're not quite sure and you think, do I need extra cortisol? Take it. For a day or two, it'll do no harm. If you keep that going for 3 months, then you're likely to start causing yourself problems.
Okay, thank you. So the last question I'm going to come to is from Karen. I keep my injection kit in my daily bag. Is this okay, or should I be putting it in the fridge overnight? It's
fine. Keep it, you know, if you want to keep it in your bag so that when you go, wherever you go, it's with you. Fine, that's fine. The expiry date on the pack, obviously you need to keep it to maintain that expiry date. It needs usually to be kept below 25 degrees. So when we've got 40 degrees of heat outside, it's maybe not a good idea to be having it around in your backpack while you're strolling through the park or whatever. Not without something to keep it a bit on the cooler side. But for the general English weather, you know, we're not often in that heat. It should be fine, shouldn't be a problem. And many people will carry their injection pack with them when they go out.
Sorry, can I interject there? Because I've been given the sodium phosphate solution, and that specifically says it's supposed to be kept at room temperature. I mean, I think you're talking about the dry powder. No?
Yeah.
Right.
Some people will keep in a fridge to just make sure it doesn't overheat. But the room temperature thing is the below 25 degrees for most medications. So for most medications, unless they specifically state must be kept between 2 and 8, the ideal temperature to keep them at is general room temperature, which is below 25 degrees.
Yeah.
Anything over 25 degrees.
I used to work for a pharmaceutical company, and obviously storing things at lower temperatures can cause things to precipitate, can't they? So
Yeah. So if you put them in a fridge and they're not meant to be in there, you get problems with separations and precipitations and things. And if you put them into too hot a temperature, they degrade and they're not non-effective. So it is important to get that storage right. And again, if you're out and about with it in your bag and you're on a bus in the sunlight and that's going to heat it up, that's not going to be good for it either.
Okay, thank you, Pauline. So I'm really sorry to everyone that we didn't get the opportunity to answer your questions. Obviously, we had so many, which is really brilliant, that you all want to be informed about your condition. But if we weren't able to get to your question, then please, you can give either Pauline a call tomorrow on the endocrine nurse helpline. Is it 10 till 2 or 11?
What are we doing? Oh, well, we've got the booked sessions 10 to 11, so 11 till 2 tomorrow and 11 till 2 on Thursday.
Yeah, so you can give that number a call if you've got more questions, or you can email our helpline, so that's helpline@pituitary.org.uk, and that is on the screen. So yeah, thank you everyone for attending, and obviously thank you to Pauline for imparting all of your incredible knowledge to us. We're very grateful to have you and all of your expertise.
You are very, very welcome. I just hope everybody stays safe, and hopefully there's been one or two things at least tonight that help just tighten up that sick day recognition, recognizing those signs, recognizing when that extra dose is needed, how to manage it, you know, dealing with the GP, getting those things from the GP, making sure you've got enough supply. The biggest, most important thing about it is, despite all of this sick day awareness and all of this doubling up and everything else, this should not run your life. This should just sit in your life, and it should adapt to you, really. So, you know, so you may get some instructions of take your tablets at this time, and this time. If that doesn't suit your day, then flex them around a bit to suit your day. So long as you take your dose, the total dose, then you'll be safe. And enjoy life, really. The whole idea about getting all this work done and having all these doctor's appointments and all of the interventions is so that you can get on and enjoy life. So get out there and enjoy it.
Oh, well said, Pauline. I have just popped a little donation link in the chat. So obviously there is no obligation, but if you are able to leave a donation, that will help us to run more sessions like this so that we can help reach others. And equally, we're trying to share more of your stories of living with your conditions. So if you do want to share your story, you can email our main admin line, and we can get in touch about sharing your story. So that might go on social media, on our website, or maybe in Pituitary Life. So I've just popped that email in the chat as well. And yeah, thank you once again, everyone, for joining. Have a lovely rest of your evening, and hopefully we'll see you all at another session soon.
Good night, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.